Welcome to the Calm Cockpit Podcast, the show that helps pilots think clearly, stay calm, and perform at their best when it matters most. Each episode delivers practical strategies, real-world aviation wisdom, and mindset tools that help create confident pilots and safe flights.
Today, we're talking about handling failure, what it feels like, what is it, how to push through it, and techniques on how to make sure it doesn't change your mindset away from success.
We'll get into those dreaded check ride failures, that botched lesson, and how to recover quickly and efficiently.
Failure can stick with you. It can replay in your head and make you question everything.
But today we want to talk about how to integrate failure into your plan for success.
From overcoming failures to reframing perfectionism, we'll dive into the mindsets that help us grow and practical techniques to help reset after a tough challenge.
The Calm Cockpit Podcast starts now.
Mike Oscar, runway 27, clear for takeoff.
Welcome, everyone, to today's episode. I'm Gita Brown, licensed yoga and meditation educator and music educator with over 30 years of experience of teaching high performers how to improve their lives and improve their performance, but without adding any extra stress. And I'm also a midlife student pilot.
And I'm John Niehaus, corporate pilot and flight instructor.
Yeah, let's just stink this episode up. Let's make it the worst failure ever so we can be like a living example of all of this. So let's start with what is failure anyway? To me, it's when my expectation for how something is going to go and then the reality of the outcome don't match up. Then my brain goes, that's a failure. And it instantly starts to go bad, and right into sympathetic nervous system freak out mode. But the yogi in me tries to, and I consistently try to train that everything is as it is. And sometimes even a success is actually a failure and a failure is actually a success. And it's a little bit of a mind scramble. It takes a lot of practice, which is a lot about what we're going to talk about today. But that's really hard to hold on to when you bounce a landing or you bust a check ride, to be like, oh, everything just is as it is. I'm totally fine with all of this. It sounds good in theory, but it's hard to do in practice.
I kind of like your thought process on your expectations versus what actually happened, because, if you think about it, when you're defining failure, you look at the different types of students when you were growing up, right? So there was the valedictorians that anything below a 90% or a 98%, depending on the person, was like, oh, I totally bombed that test.
Yep.
Then you have sort of the people like me where it's like, ooh, I got an 80. That's amazing. So good.
Yeah.
So I definitely think that your measurement of success isn't necessarily exactly what society defines as passing or failing. It's what were you thinking was going to happen. So I like how you described that. And I also think that there's a huge difference between the concept of failure and the concept of personal growth, because as you sort of led into, the idea of failing can lead to personal growth if you're sort of a glass half full type of person.
Yeah. And it's almost impossible for me anyway to have that mindset shift when I'm feeling the failure. When I'm in that feeling state, in that day of or day after, that is not the time for big high philosophy. And, you tell anyone in that down moment, this will be for your own future growth. And they're going to want to smack you in the face because it's not helpful in that moment. Because in that moment, it's like they say with animals do, they retreat to their den and they lick their wounds, right? And so maybe we can kind of start there, a little more practical strategy. So for me as a music educator, I've trained a lot of people who go out to these big auditions and, the big deal, they want to win the competition and then they go and they bomb, they have a memory blip, and the concerto that they know by heart, they get halfway through and they can't play the end of it because they literally freeze. And then they come to me and they're, disappointed to say the least. And so in those moments, the strategy is actually to abandon all this philosophy and just to get really nuts and bolts. And again, think about what animals do. They literally call it licking their wounds. You need to retreat to a place of safety to let your nervous system just get regulated. Process the higher level cognitive thoughts of it later and how you're going to move forward and shift to a growth mindset later. But initially, that gut punch of a failure is going to override your cerebral cortex's ability to process that higher level thinking. You're in a purely emotional, reactive, sympathetically nervous system driven state. It's like an extended fight, flight, freeze, or flee mode. We've all felt it, right? You just,
Oh, yeah.
you like shake, you might feel a little cold, the butterflies in the stomach, you're thinking those repetitive thoughts. It's like you're just stuck in the moment of the failure. Like, been there recently myself. So that licking of the wounds then is like retreating to those things that reset your nervous system to stability. Some people, it's like hardcore exercise really does it for them. Going for a run or intense exercise helps some people. Other people are more like, I need to go on the couch and cover up with a blanket and cry where no one can see me. But giving yourself that permission to like have that pity party, if that's what you need to do, perfect. Other people are verbal processors. They need to go to a trusted mentor or something and just talk it out. And other people need to do it in private. Everyone listening, you'll know what are those things that restore your nervous system to balance. Not that you're going to get stuck in that poor me mode, but for my students, I tell them once we've identified what it is, you're going to time that processing. You're going to give yourself a day, 2 days, an evening. What is it? And you tell your brain you have until 8 a.m. tomorrow morning to feel all the feelings and to do all the woe is me and that, all the things you need to do. But at 8 a.m. tomorrow or at 2 p.m. tomorrow, you're going to set it aside and make some actions that are going to take you forward. But a lot of people try to skip that processing time or they get stuck in it. And that becomes like a self-definition. I failed. And then they just they either don't go back or they quit. So I think in our society, we don't do a good job at just letting people feel crappy for a minute and just give yourself permission. I'm a crier. I'm someone who I actually need to do a release cry. I hate it. I don't like crying in front of people, especially as a woman. Oh, I'm like, if I do that in a professional setting, they'll think I'm not professional. So I take myself somewhere private and usually it lasts 2 minutes. But then as soon as I'm done crying, it's like, it's a release, a physiological reset. And then I'm good to go. I'm that cry in the bathroom person. That's me. Now you guys know my secrets. But that handling moments of failure is give yourself a timed moments to process it. And then after, it's not like you're being a jerk to yourself and like you should be over it by 8 a.m. 2 days later. It's just that at that point you say, when my mind keeps going back to the failure, I say, yes, I acknowledge that's still there. Here's what I'm focusing on now. What am I doing now and what's next? And if you're still troubled with those thought loops that keep coming back, like my student who froze in the concerto competition, I said, every time you have a thought loop about, oh my God, what if I freeze again? What if it happens again? What if my memory goes and I can't ever perform in front of people without music again? And the mind starts to create all this drama. Tell your mind, I hear you. At 5 p.m. today, we're going to take half an hour and we're going to think all those thoughts at that point. We're going to write them down. We're going to get them out. We're going to go talk to a counselor. But I'm delaying worrying about that till 5 o'clock today. And I'm going to give myself a half-hour appointment to deal with that. But the rest of the day, I'm focusing on what I'm doing now and what's next. It's called a worry appointment. You like literally set a date. And it helps me so much because I'm a perseverator and a fixer. I'll just want to figure it out in my mind. I have to tell my mind, hey, 5 p.m. tonight, we have a little date. We can worry about it all we want then and get it all out. And that way it gives some like structure to the processing of it as well. So you don't get stuck in over identifying with an event that happened. That's my little rant. What do you think?
I'm a doom spiraler.
I mean, it's just so, there's a reason why we do this podcast together.
Yeah.
We are very simpatico in that, right?
I mean, I have found that I'm very good at handling the situation in the moment.
Yes.
And then it's like I
later
will
on,
spiral
right?
the second I get home.
Totally.
And even to a point of like, there are times where, again, I've managed to translate these things into positive stories and success and blah, blah, blah. But it's still just like so many times I've said this on the podcast. 10 years later, I'll be laying with my eyes looking into the ceiling in my bed, having no reason to be thinking about this and going, I remember that thing 10 years ago. I sucked at that. That was really bad.
Mm-hmm.
And the next thing you know, I'm up till 3 a.m. So I can't say that I'm necessarily an authority on forgetting those sorts of things. However, I am especially a sympathetic ear in terms of understanding how that works. But I have learned over the years to figure out ways of pushing past that. And I think that that's something as pilots, you kind of have to develop. You really don't have a choice, because either you quit or you keep going. There is no other alternative, especially if it's in the moment. You're flying an airplane and you just failed at a landing and you had to go around, and now all of a sudden you're like, I have to do this again. This happened to me recently. I have to do this again. I don't want to do it again. Guess what? You don't have a choice.
Yes.
So you cannot let that past failure affect your future performance. And I think that that's kind of summarizing all of what we're trying to get through with all the different ways of talking about this in this episode.
Yeah. I mean, there's two things to what you just said. The one is, like we used to say in tennis, have a short memory. You know, you botch one point, short memory. What just happened? I don't know. I'm playing the point right in front of me. Like, I'm not getting caught up in it, which I think is important while you're flying. Amen. However, you know, speaking as like a therapeutic yoga person and all the mental performance training, your mind still remembers the quote unquote failure. So at some point, if there's not a way that we process through it, those are the ones that get stuck, and the mind, in the lack of that resolution, will offer it to you as something you need to solve at some future date. It will keep popping up, and very often it pops up subconsciously, and we don't even know that that little unresolved feeling of inadequacy or ineffectiveness or imposter syndrome is kind of still there. So having ways to actually laugh about it with a buddy, chat to a mentor. It doesn't have to be like a heavy deep dive with a freaking therapist. Sometimes just talking to another pilot and like having a moment of levity breaks the logjam and lets your brain feel like, I've processed it, period, end of sentence, and can move on. But I think sometimes people try to like just push past it without actually just letting themselves feel the suck for a minute. And that's why I say that licking the wounds and giving yourself permission to kind of go there a little bit is actually a strength. Because if you don't do that, it lingers. The mind does not like that sense of irresolution. There's 3 primary human needs that we all have in order to feel like we have efficacy in our lives. And the first one is to feel competence. We have to feel like we're effective at what we do in order to be satisfied. So if you have this lingering little doubt because you just try to push past it and just pretend like that failure didn't bother you, that little nugget of unresolved neurons that are firing is going to erode at that feeling of competency. And we also need to feel relatedness, which is connection. Like, we're connecting right now, feels good, it's nice. And we also need to feel a sense of autonomy, like we can choose the direction of our life, that we're not powerless, we're not just being bossed around, you know, by the flight scheduler or by whatever we think is guiding us. So competence, relatedness, and autonomy are 3 areas to kind of look at when you're like reeling from a failure and you just feel like, I can't even think straight. I can't even talk to my loved one because my brain is replaying, you know, the bounce landing. Go to competency, relatedness, and autonomy and be like, which one needs a little oomph right now and where can I get it for myself? Those things have really helped me. And to be with trusted people that I know can just reflect back to me like, you're good. It was one little thing. Look at the 99 other things you did well. You know, that perspective really helps. We lose perspective though when we're in that failure mode. It's like, oh my God, we forgot about the 99.99 things that we did well. It's tough.
Well, and it's funny because that's where so much of this podcast comes from. When we were talking about the original idea of what we wanted to accomplish here, so much of it comes from our own backgrounds. I mean, I know, speaking for myself specifically, so much of my training, my path to becoming a professional pilot, it was riddled in all of these hardships. And I don't say that as a woe is me or any of that kind of stuff, but I say it as if those kinds of things can be spoken about, like what we're doing right now, it does allow for people to realize that these things are not the end of the world. And pilots traditionally have never been good about having those discussions. We always look at the super pilot airline captain who walks through the terminal, as we've said again many times, and thinking that this person's a perfect person, a perfect pilot. They never struggled. They never had any failures. They passed every check ride. And that's frankly not necessarily the case. I mean, there's a limit to the amount of failures you can have over a course of a career, obviously, but 9 times out of 10, people don't get to that point. It's always better to feel like you can achieve something when you see somebody who has sharing some of the issues that they've had, stumbling blocks, if you will, to get there along the way.
The stories we tell about our failures is such an important thing. Like, I had a great story. I was afraid of flying, so therefore I couldn't do it. And that was all made up in my head, if you look at that. Right? Like, objectively, there was no reason for me to fear commercial aviation. We know how safe it is. There's no reason. I should be more afraid to get in my car and drive than I should to get on a United flight to go to Dallas. But my mind made up this big story, and then therefore it told me a story about my capacity to be able to fly an airplane. And then once I realized it was all just a big lie that my mind made up, then it was like, okay, now I got to unpick that whole drama I told. But to your point, like, if we have a check ride failure, it can then lead to, I would imagine, telling yourself a story. I must not be cut out for this career, or I'm not like the other pilots who are just naturally gifted and can just do all these wonderful things without even as much struggle. So talk to me about what's that like. I know there's been this, like the big C. It's not cancer. It's check ride. You know, like, what is that like to actually have a check ride that did not end with your expectation reality meeting beautifully and blissfully?
Yeah, I mean, I get to go on public record saying I do not have a perfect record. And for those of you in it, I have managed to make a career anyways. But yeah, I had an issue for my private pilot, and it happened probably within the first 3 minutes of the flight portion of a check ride.
Wow.
And I'm going to tell the story, and I'm not making excuses for myself. It is legitimately the details of what happened. And did I make a mistake? Yes, I did.
This was back in college, right?
This was.
Okay, so this was a minute ago, and now you're flying a Gulfstream.
Yeah, right? It was a long time ago. Yeah.
Now you're flying a Gulfstream all over the world, just in case anyone is new to the podcast. You're kind of a badass. So, okay, but back in the day.
Yeah, this was 2006, 20 years ago.
Wow.
Oh my God. My grandfather, the joke for most of his life was that when he passed away, they were going to put an L and an R on his tombstone so that he could remember which way was left and which way was right. Unfortunately, that skipped a generation and landed squarely on my shoulders.
Nice.
Because I tend to sometimes have that trouble too. And so, yeah, I had the ground portion of the check ride that went well enough to pass, I suppose. So I had no complaints there. And I was in a 172. I was coming out of a towered airport. I took off with the examiner. Gosh, I think it was even like a short field or a soft field takeoff. So it was kind of like, we're really ripping the Band-Aid off to start this thing.
Yep.
And I nailed that. And the controller said something along the lines of, turn left to 300. And I had a bit of a dyslexic moment and turned right to 030 or vice versa. I don't remember exactly what it was.
Yep.
But somehow I transposed numbers. I started that turn. And this is the part where that story is a little bit of the excuse, where like I noticed it before Tower did, and I noticed it before the examiner did, and immediately went, oh, that's not right, and started turning back the other direction.
Yeah.
And the examiner busted me.
Wow.
Yeah.
No leeway.
In my defense, I feel like he was a little bit harsh, but I still made the mistake. I screwed it up.
Right. Right.
We didn't cause any traffic issues. We didn't have any safety issues. It was legit. Like I turned to the right and went, nope. And turned to the left. Everything was fine. And right then and there, he said, I'm sorry, but that is the end of this check ride.
Wow.
So,
dude, you were on the departure leg, like climbing out and donezo.
That's it. Yep.
My heart, even though I know you just got back from a trip flying a Gulfstream, my heart breaks a little bit. That must have just been like
devastating.
I could just feel it in my body, like my stomach just sinking and like, oh my gosh. Wow.
Now, I am extremely proud of myself and how I handled this, because one of the things that my instructor told me, and this is something I have told every student that I've ever had, you cannot fail the same check ride twice in the same day.
Mm-hmm.
And so if something happens, you need to figure out a way to take that bit of disappointment, that failure, crumble it up into a nice, tiny little ball and throw it over your shoulder.
Yeah.
Because barring a major safety issue or just like a personal, I cannot handle this situation.
Yeah.
The examiner will generally give you the option like, hey, I have to tell you that this check ride is registered as incomplete. You did not pass that maneuver satisfactorily. We've got a few things left to do. Do you want to do them or do you want to go back?
Yep.
And the answer is you now have a free pass to screw up again.
Totally.
So you can do as much as you can. And if you fail another maneuver, it just gets added to the list of what you have to do on the second go.
Yeah. You've got nothing to lose, really, right? Like
Exactly.
pressure's off in a way.
And so in my case, the examiner, he took I can't remember, but I think he took the controls for about a minute while I composed myself.
That was nice of him after his kind of harsh thing, but okay. Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, obviously I have your back on this, I'm like a mama bear. I'm like, don't mess with Johnny Ian.
Right. And he said, do you want to keep going? I said, yeah, I will tell you, again, proud of myself a little bit. I passed everything else. And so my instructor, who was, of that similar mindset, was talking to the examiner, and the examiner said, hey, you've got to do some retraining before we retest. And my instructor was like, so I have to tell him to turn right and hope he doesn't turn left? Like, what am I supposed to retest?
I was going to say, it's not like you totally missed your aiming point on a softfield or something. Yeah.
You can hear the defensiveness coming out as I'm like, yeah, this is all it was. And legit, that's what it was. But again, I screwed up. So we did, 2 trips around the pattern with my instructor, and I ended up going back with the examiner, and I managed to turn the correct direction. And that was all he wanted to see. And we came back in for a landing.
So your next check ride was literally just a lap in the pattern.
That's it.
Oh my God. Yep.
Although I will tell you, I had done all of my performance landings. And so all I had to do was a normal landing after a trip in the pattern. And that was probably one of my most stressful landings, because I'm like, if I screw this up,
yes,
what else can I possibly do here? Because this should be the easiest thing in the world. And so thankfully it went okay. Everything was fine. And I got my private pilot certificate. That was a huge part of my initial development. And in that moment, even up unto having finished the check ride and successfully completed it, that was a huge, oh my God, my life is over kind of moment. Like I might as well just be an accountant. No offense to accountants. If I can't get past this first step, how am I going to get 6, 7 steps down the layer? And again, you start to do that doom spiral of my life is a fraud and I need to find something else to do.
Isn't it amazing how you can go from one quote unquote failure, one moment where expectation and reality don't match, to now my whole career is over. That's it. And I'm sure you're in college, so probably lots of other people were passing and they're moving on, and there's that time pressure. And I mean, that's a lot. But man, that says a lot about you in the moment of the check ride, that you didn't just turn tail and just fly a lap in the pattern and just land and be like, I give up. Like, you're like, nope, I'm just going to keep on going. Would people like to say that that's like a character trait? And to a certain extent it is, but I believe it's a decision that we make ahead of time. Whether we know it consciously or not, somewhere, John, I'm guessing that you decided this is something I want to do. I'm going to continue going on no matter what the challenges are. Like you just decided. I just think if people really want something, they figure out a way to make it happen. And I think, otherwise we make excuses and we pretend like the excuse is the reason, when the truth is really we don't want to do it.
It's tough. I can't say it was a conscious decision, but it was also just when you're sitting there and somebody's looking at you and you just made a major screw up, especially in the very beginning. I can't tell you where my head was at. Just kind of happened that way. So you sort of get into that moment where you're kind of watching yourself from behind you, and you're just like, just
out of body experience at this point.
Just keep going.
Yep.
I had so back to my own musical experience. Here you go.
Back in the archive now.
Yeah, they say that like a lot of pilots were at one point or currently are musicians. There's a correlation there. They've done the research, which is why there's the Flying Musicians Association. If you're a pilot and a musician, look into that. I had a similar situation in music. Every year, my drum teacher would have me memorize a drum solo, and we would go to a competition hosted by, I don't even know if they're still around, the American Guild of Music, AGM, they called it. Yeah. I had this one that I had just been practicing for like 4 or 5 months, just nonstop practicing. I got into the actual competition. I don't even know what happened, but somewhere in there, I left out the last 4 lines of music because it had to all be just memorized from your head.
Yeah.
the judge was like, so that was good, but you didn't play all of it. And I went, what? What do you mean I didn't play all of it? And he's like, nope, you definitely didn't play all of it. And this is very similar to the check ride experience.
Yeah.
He's like, I will reconsider how I vote your position if you can, without looking at the music, figure out where you stopped and play the rest of it.
Oh, wow. And under pressure too.
I have no idea how I managed to figure it out.
Yeah.
But yeah, the last 3 or 4 lines of music, and I ended up starting it and playing it to the end. From that point, I don't know, somehow I got third. So that was pretty cool. But
do you still have a medal from that? You have a little third place medal that you wear on occasion, wear around the house.
But back to the original point of all of this, like, I think some of that perseverance in the screw up maybe had started there, which is why advocating for some of the things that you do in school, whether it be getting up in front of the classroom and having to present something to playing music for a competition or in a band, like all of that stuff does prep you to a future in surviving some of those experiences.
Totally. It's like I tell my music students all the time, 90% of what we're going to do in here is helping you to be comfortable being uncomfortable. Because no matter how long you do it, getting up there in front of an audience, no matter how seasoned you are, you will feel nervous. Some of you will puke before you go on stage. You'll be shaking. And we just get more tolerance for being so freaking uncomfortable because the benefit is worth it. And I think part of what you're talking about too is they always say, rely on the training. If you've done the training, then even when you bust your check ride on the departure climb, all that other training does not go away. All of your other talents and abilities have not gone away. That one moment doesn't define the sum total of your skills. You still have that, even though you don't feel it in that moment. What I see you is you just relied on everything that you had trained and you just executed it. It doesn't surprise me. So that having that short memory, but again, I feel like you have a strong sense of autonomy, like you choose your own direction. Because in both of those moments, you could have said, no, I'm just going to stop. But you said, no, like I'm making the decision to keep going. And that's, again, one of those things that we need for that psychological stability is to feel that sense of autonomy. And very often it's so easy to get into a victim mode when we have a failure. It's so easy to, woe is me, woe is me. And boy, that person's really fun to be around. Like that's been me on many occasions where my friends are like, oh, okay, this story again. Stop telling the story. Time to move on.
Maybe I'm just severely stubborn. The woe is me does happen as well. It just happens after the fact. And I think that it's important to note that as we are dealing with these emotions and dealing with these feelings, there are 2 ways to deal with it, right? And I think I'm no different. I mean, as human beings, there are sometimes we choose to deal with these emotions in ways that are negative. And that is not a helpful way to deal with things. And it's easy for me to say. You can either push past it and make it into something that turns into a superpower, or you can, like you said, sit in a woe is me environment, make further bad decisions, and that spirals the whole situation into a deeper place.
Yeah. What would you say to someone who just failed the check ride? You were a CFI, you still are a CFI, but it's been a minute since you were active. What would you say to someone who's like, oh my God, what now?
I've always pushed past into kind of my own background. It's I've had these issues. I've had stage checks at a university where that's like an internal check ride that didn't get passed. I've had the check ride issue. I have always tried to use myself as an example of like, look, you can screw up and still make it. And I think that for me has allowed me to weaponize it in a positive way, because I have seen some of my fellow instructors, some of my fellow pilots who didn't struggle, who didn't fail, who didn't have to dust themselves off and pick back up because they were good, because they are good. One of my best friends is one of the most talented pilots I know, and he's never failed a check ride, and he's always walked in confident, and he's always walked into every recurrent. He's a professional pilot saying, this is no big deal. I'm just going to go do my thing and get out the door, where I'm sitting there going, well, I've been studying for the last 3 months. because even though I should be confident, I'm not. It has allowed me to be better, force myself to be better. I think that pilots who struggle make better instructors, because the instructors who have always been amazing at what they do and haven't seen those road bumps don't necessarily know how to push a student past those road bumps when they encounter it. If somebody doesn't understand, they don't necessarily get it because they always understood.
Mm-hmm.
And so again, when you're thinking about these things, when you're going to a job interview, they always tell you, be honest, but find a way to make it positive. Do not try to hide that check ride failure. Tell the story and tell it in a way that it isn't like, oh, that examiner had it out to get me. Like, oh, I didn't deserve to fail. This person did this thing or that thing. I'll be the first to tell you, I turned the wrong way. Is it stupid? Absolutely. But did I screw up? Yes, I did. Have I done that since then? Yes. Luckily for me, that's why standard operating procedures in a larger airplane are what they are. You know, you have a second pilot there and you say, hey, I'm going to turn this way. And they go, nope, you're going to go that way. And you're like, okay, cool. Yep. So it's not even that you learn from the mistake and never do it again. You just learn to recognize it and learn how to handle it as you move forward and understand that this may happen again.
Yeah. Yeah. Something I hear really resonates with me where you're talking about at some point helping other people with what you yourself are struggling with. To me, that is such a great antidote. I was about to say anecdote. It's a great antidote to that sinking doom feeling of like, I get caught in my own head, just playing things over and over and over again. And the easiest way for me to shortcut that loop for myself goes back to that 3 things we need to feel a sense of psychological wholeness is that connectedness piece. And when I connect with other people, whether I'm helping them as a mentor or an advocate or reaching out to them saying, hey, I'm struggling with this, man. It just stinks, even just for a little commiseration, that helps so much. But I think sometimes when we fail, we self-isolate. That used to be what I would do. And it was a huge mistake because I was ashamed of my failures, didn't want anyone else to see it. I was the ultimate perfectionist. I was the extreme level, like not a hair out of place, dressed to the nines, always like sharp and on point. But inside, I was an insecure, riddled mess. But for me, that relatedness and connection with other people around my own failures or with fear of flying, working with people in the Love Fly community, which is a community of people helping others to overcome a fear of flying, gives me so much because it gets me out of my own head and my own ego, my own drama, right? And it's just like connected to something bigger and life kind of lightens up that way. I want to get back to perfectionism here, but without dwelling on it too much, I do want to kind of just hit on that fundamental worldview that I think like as grown-ups, at some point, it's worth considering how do we want to fundamentally view the world? And for me, I had to figure this out when I got divorced many, many years ago. Married to a wonderful man now, it's going on 20 years, but in my previous life, I was married to my childhood sweetheart. He became addicted to drugs and alcohol, and if you've ever loved anyone with substance abuse disorder, it's awful because you lose them literally, like their mind and body goes and you lose the friendship. I lost the marriage, like everything I built my life on literally just went away and he eventually passed from his disorder. So, it was as bad can be. So that to me was the most epic life failure, right? The failure of a marriage, public. This thing that's supposed to be forever to your childhood sweetheart is now over. I was so self-isolating because I was so ashamed and then so ashamed of him and substance abuse disorder. You can imagine all of the layers of shame. But as soon as I started opening up and talking about it, my God, the floodgates reversed, right? And then all this love came to me. But I had to decide in those moments, even while we were divorcing, do I fundamentally view that I need to achieve X, Y, and Z and never be a failure in order to be successful, to be happy, to have worth, to have community? Or am I just going to believe that everything is fundamentally just happening as it is and that my reactions to it can either create more abundance or more suffering? and that it's actually going to be my choice. And so I decided, and it was the hardest thing I ever did, I decided to do all of it with love. And that means the way we got divorced was with love. We did it together. Like our divorce ceremony was as powerful as our marriage ceremony. We decoupled with so much love, and even though it ended in his death, it shifted the way I viewed the world, because I was either going to look at myself as a failure because I'm a divorcee and I failed at this huge life mission that I had, or I'm going to still fundamentally believe that love, decency, connection, joy, opportunity are all there, and that's what I'm here for, and that's what I'm going to stand for, even when things are hard. So I feel like failure, it's like that thin end of the wedge that was like, for me, poking at like, stop hiding all of your insecurity, woman. Decide that life is fundamentally going to support you and you will have what you need. And I made that decision, and it's been so much easier ever since. But that came after years of perfectionism and years of failure that I tried to hide from the world. And it was a waste of energy and a waste of time. So that was a long diatribe, but it kind of, I think failure, it cuts to, it's not just the bounce landing or the failed check ride, right? It's like this fundamental view. What is important to you in your life, and how do you want to live? Because we are not our bounce landings or our mistakes. Is life out to get you, or are you there to enjoy life? You know what I mean? I know how I want to be. I want to play. Life is a game. It's supposed to be fun. So let's talk about perfectionism. Perfectionism, I feel like, so ties into failure. At least it did for me. Maybe this is just my own personal drama here, but it's like, they're close. They're like twins, maybe?
In a way. I mean, we've talked so much about perfectionism over the time.
Yeah.
And I still struggle because, and this has been a conversation, because it's almost, I don't want to call it a defense mechanism, but
it is.
The failures from the past have caused me to, in some cases, obsess about where I know my weak points are and then build them up.
Yeah.
And so in my case, I've looked at it as I'm a little bit of a perfectionist on certain things because I know that I struggle with them and then I do better.
Yep.
So if I obsess about it, again, going into a recurrent or a check ride, and I'm studying twice as hard than everybody else because I know that maybe I need to, so far it's worked for me. So I've been rewarded by maybe damaging my brain in a perfectionist mindset. So it's one of those like, show me where perfectionism is wrong. But I also recognize that I could go through a recurrent and be a foot off of center line and go, well, today was awful. And the examiner's like, because of why? Well, it wasn't perfect. Show me when it's supposed to be. So I know I'm talking about out of both sides of my mouth here, but it's like, it forces me to be better, but then it also forces me to obsess about little things that don't matter.
Yeah, totally. It's a thin line between the two. There was one reminding me of a study session I did this weekend where I was diving into like one line of the ACS, right? For the private pilot check ride. I literally had 6 books open, like 3 tabs open on my computer. I had the flashcards out. And that's what it took though for me to figure out that everyone was explaining it to me and I'm watching the YouTube videos, and finally I was like, time out. I'm going to the source documents. I'm diving deep. I'm not getting my butt out of this chair until I understand the difference between a freaking MEL, an MMEL, and a KOEL. Like, what the what? What? It's just this labyrinth of sentences that just interweave and interlap. And I just butt in the seat, like you're saying, perfectionist in me. Like, let's drill down till I understand it. I think for me, in all of my playing with all of this over the years, it's come down to a difference of when I'm doing something like that, I'm doing it because the joy and the thrill of the learning is inherently valuable and fun at some level, even when I'm like pulling my hair out and I feel like I'm climbing through FAA mud. But there's some level of it that like, yeah, this is awesome. Whereas like old me that had it tied to, I better not screw this up. That's what was driving my behavior. Before I was using perfectionism and overwork like that, quite honestly, to help me regulate my own anxiety about being afraid I wouldn't perform. Whereas now this is freaking cool and interesting and hard, and I like the challenge. It's the same exact thing you're doing, but it's coming from a different internal motivation, and then it just becomes more fun. But it's the same level of work. And this is where I often butt heads with other music educators when they would come observe me, because they'd be like, you don't seem to be working them very hard on technique. And I'm like, we are. It just doesn't look like we're working hard. Because when you make a musician into a technician, they're really boring to listen to and they have no joy in music and then they quit. But then my kids are going off and winning all these things. So there's this difference of like, you can work that hard. We're not saying to let go of that, just saying what is the underlying motivation? Back to my rant about how do you fundamentally view the world? Do you have to prove your worth through overwork and over worry? And that's like a shield against failure? Or do you believe that I can handle things? I'm enjoying what I'm doing and this is a game and let's get it? It's a really different feeling. It's hard to explain. This is why people enter into my studio for music and they stay for 4 years because you have to go through it. And I will tell you, John, the music students who fail on auditions, who are perfectionists, they usually kind of won't roll with me on some of the crazy ass things I asked them to do because they want to just drill and train themselves into achievement. And then they get to an audition where eventually they bomb and they're like, oh, now I see why that doesn't work. And it's at that low level of just having had that failure where they just can't sustain it anymore for whatever reason, or they just literally bomb. Then they're like, okay, let's try that other wacky stuff of maybe letting go a little bit. And then like the tide shifts. So I think we conflate overwork and over worry with achievement or something. I don't know. Talk to me. Because I used to do the same thing. Like if I just figure everything out and overwork it, then I'll never make a mistake. But that didn't work. It wasn't accurate for me. Why do we get caught in overwork as a protection against failure?
That is a great question. And if I knew the answer to that, I would be making millions right now.
We do need the work, though. We do need it. But I'm talking about like the underlying motivation. It's either going to be like self-punishment or it's going to be celebration. And how do you want to live?
Or a combination of both.
Yeah.
Which is where I found my bread and butter. It's a combination of a lot of things. I think that the essence of this episode is understanding failure. It's understanding that it happens to all of us at any given point, but then it's also that picking yourself up, brushing yourself off and doing it again or not.
Yeah.
Right? Maybe sometimes going, this isn't for me, or I don't want to do this, is the most healthy thing for you to do.
Yes.
I've had to live through that too. Not so much for me. Well, I'm sure it's happened over the years for me as well, but I can think of a time as an instructor, and it was one of the most difficult discussions I ever had to have. I had a student who I could tell liked it, didn't love it. It was work, but it wasn't fun work. And I was pushing him towards doing a written test. He was essentially cheating on the written test, like the practice test to get a good score so that I would sign him off.
Oh, jeez.
And I knew that was what he was doing. And I confronted him and said, hey, you were getting like 45s yesterday and now you're getting 90s. Like that's not possible.
Wow.
We ended up having a discussion of like, I'll believe you. And I'm not an instructor who signs people off who don't deserve it.
Yeah.
However, there's also that line of like, okay, it's a written test. I called him out. He said no. All right.
See what happens.
It's your future. I'm telling you not to do this, but here you go. Needless to say, as I expected, that didn't go well. And it was a good thing in the sense that it was a catalyst to the discussion of, look, if this isn't what you want, then you need to have an honest discussion with yourself.
Yeah.
And it turned out it wasn't what he wanted. It was what his dad wanted.
Oh, boy.
So this is a whole nother aspect of that failure. It was almost that we all know the result of what's about to happen. And I'm giving you the opportunity to do it anyways, knowing that it's going to be a catalyst to a larger personal growth discussion. And it was. Thank God in a sense, thank God I was right, but I wish I had been wrong.
Yeah.
And so, there's that point too of like, yes, in some cases we want to brush ourselves off. In some cases we want to admit to ourselves, not defeat, but do I want to do this in the first place? Is it for me? Am I doing this for the wrong reasons? That's where failure can be useful as well. So I don't know. It's just a weird discussion of how do you weaponize it for good?
Yeah.
And there's so many different paths to take depending on what exactly is taking place in that point.
Yeah. It can also be timing sometimes too. It's like, yes, that is the right path, but now is not the right time. Like for a lot of us midlife private pilots, there's been times where I've had to pause my training so many times, like when my father passed, all kinds of health issues, with family at home where I just have to say, time out. It's not great to have to take a month off. This is going to set me back, but it's not the right time to push forward, when these things are going on. So sometimes failure is just a timing issue. That's where we need other people, other people to help us. I had a great mentor once who told me a little bit of a story who I believe he got from one of his teachers. I can't remember the exact, lineage of the anecdote, but it's basically success and failure are opposite sides of the same coin, but that sometimes we forget that we're holding the whole coin ourselves all the time. We only ever see the success or the failure, but we forget we always have the coin and it's going to flip from one to the other. And he told me, he said, if you want to be better at handling failure, every time you have a success and you find yourself getting like, ooh, I did so good. I'm so awesome. We're like, look at me. We got the strut. He's like, just tell yourself, this too shall pass. Remind yourself, like, this feeling's going to go away. A week from now, you might be feeling exactly the lowest ebb of your high right now. He said that way, then when you have that hard moment, you'll go, this too shall pass, because that coin's going to flip and you're going to go back to the success side. These are things that we yogis like to practice all the time because it's like the game of life, Another one thing he told me about this was back when I was playing tennis, he was like, you're going to have hard losses, when you play singles tennis, and you're just going to get all the way to the end of the tournament and then you're going to lose in the semis, which I did. He said, but when and if you lose that match, at tennis, you very politely go up to the net and you shake hands with your opponent. He's like, think about how after you lost that match, all you see in front of you is the face of someone who's so happy because they just won and they're going on to the finals. That's what you see. What do they see? They see a person who's sad. They just lost. Wah, bah, bah. So who's happier in that moment? The person who gets to look at that person who's happy or the person who's looking at the person who's all dejected and sad? It's all in how you're going to look at it, Celebrate that other person and move on. There's something to lightening up that makes all of this a little easier. And I have found it easier to lighten up when times are good and kind of practice that resiliency muscle. I still get gut punched. Before we recorded this episode, I talked to you about a gut punch that happened, but it's like, it's easier for me to kind of shake it off. And at least while feeling the gut punch, to kind of keep the ball rolling towards my life and what I want. So I hope that for everyone who's listening too. So anything else we want to talk about failure? I'm checking my notes here.
I think that for the things that are important, I think that failure and resiliency are hand in hand. I think that if it's something that you want and inevitably at some point you are going to fail at something, you're not going to reach the level that you would want it to your point of sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. I mean, my last trip in the Gulf Stream, my first landing of the trip was I don't know, it was gusting to like 37 or 40 knots or something. And here I am a little bit nervous about this landing and I greased it in.
Oh, yes, you did.
So good. Now, it was a 10-hour flight and we had to reposition. So we had to get fuel in this place that was really gusty. And then we did a 10-hour flight to the destination that we were going to. Wind was light and variable. It was sunny, blue skies, and I just biffed it. I mean, it was a safe landing, but it was like, how in the world can I have this greaser in a 40-knot terrible day? And then next thing I know, I'm on a day where I have no excuse to suck and I somehow managed to do it.
Yep.
And so, you just got to keep going. That's what we've got here. And some days are going to be better than others. These are all cliches, but somehow they work.
Totally.
If it's something that's meaningful to you, you have to just keep going. You have to build that resiliency. And I think that as we have looked towards what the individual episodes that we do for this, I think that one of the things on the list, and it's an apropos topic to continue this, is the whole idea of the dreaded yips, right? Like,
oh yeah,
now you've screwed up something or you're scared of something. Somewhere along the lines, things went just slightly sideways, and you perpetuate that idea with every future one. So you have a bad landing, and next thing you know, you're overthinking every future landing that you have. And you are now creating this situation of not just a issue of perfectionism, not just an issue of failure, but this issue of like, I am dragging this idea through the rest of my life, not metaphorically speaking, like I'm dragging it forward with me.
Yeah.
And it is creating additional issues because I cannot get past it. So it is so easy to say that failures can be spun positive, that they will allow you for personal growth and all of this other stuff that we like to, be positive about. It's so much harder, as you have said in this podcast, to learn from it, actually put that into practice and move forward. And it takes practice. It takes is taking yourself aside and dealing with it however you deal with it, whether it's crying, whether it's talking to a mentor, whether it's sitting in a dark space, listening to emo music. I don't know, whatever suits your fancy, but you just have to keep going.
Yeah, I'm a little fan of very, very loud Metallica. That's just, love it. They are such talented musicians, and that just fires me up every time. Yeah, you're right. We have to enjoy the cliches for what they are, but recognize they are these cliches. I think that I just would want anyone who's listening to this to know, like, you do not have to suffer in silence. Find someone or some way that you can kind of connect, because a problem shared is half a problem. And I'd say a failure shared is way less of a failure, because we need those people to look at us objectively and to tell us what are missing, because usually right after I failed, I can't see it, but other people can see, and they can point out, hey, whoa, Geeta, look at all this other stuff. I'm like, wow, yeah, you're right. So if this podcast can be any part of that, just telling you you're in the right place, you're doing the right things, keep going, that's worth the price of admission, I hope, which is free. How about that? I can say one other tiny little thing, that this work is actually some of the hardest freaking work you'll ever do, to shift these kind of mindsets. So if it feels like a lot, I think a lot of people kind of edge away from it, and they're like, I'd rather just keep working really, really hard, because I know how to do that. I know how to put my nose in the books, and I know how to just study more. But it's really worth it to do a little bit of growth mindset work. It's really worth it to find a mental performance coach, take some of the classes with Tammy Barlett and her mental performance training that she does. I'll link that in the show notes. Find a personal coach, a pastor, preacher, counselor, like whomever, because it's the hardest work you'll ever do. But when you get that level of even trying to have that self-mastery, the life stuff that's going to come and go just gets easier. Like, it's worth it. You get so much out of it. So if it feels like it's hard work, that's because it is. But it's also really fun to look at our own minds and realize that we can actually have that autonomy, we can have that relatedness, and we can have that competency in and of ourselves, which is how we're living our lives. And then the airplanes come and go and the people come and go, but we have that power in us always. So
what's the old Thomas Edison quote? I didn't fail 100 times creating a light bulb. I just figured out 100 ways it didn't work.
Exactly. Well, I look forward to many years of epic failures with you, John.
Well, it was the story of my life. So
the next time I bounce a landing, you'll be like, just go back to that episode and listen to all that crap you said, Geeta. Come on. Because, right. I'm saying all this because I need to remember it and keep learning it and learning the lessons over and over and over again. It's never done. We always have to come back to it again.
Right. We try to have actionable steps in all of these episodes, things you can take away, things you can put into your toolkit immediately after listening to it. And unfortunately, there's not a whole lot you can do when it comes to failure other than just keep going or don't. And that's about as simple as it gets. And it's not to sound unsympathetic, because certainly I think this entire episode shows that we are, but that's how it boils it down to. And you've got to put in the work on this one. So I can tell you that I am a shining example that failure is not an end all be all. Failing a check ride, failing multiple check rides, it doesn't mean that you're not qualified. It means you had a bad day.
Mm-hmm.
And you look at what goes into passing a check ride. You've got hours and hours. That's generally a minimum of 4-hour day where you are expected to be as perfect as you can within reason. And sometimes it doesn't work out that way. It doesn't mean you don't have what it takes. It just is a test to make sure that you can get up and try again. And so don't let it ruin your life. Don't let it ruin your perspective on what this career will be. If that's what you want, just use it as a stumbling block and keep going.
One of my favorite teachers told me once, all of your failures are stepping stones to success. And I love picturing my failure as literally a stepping stone. Like, I'm stepping all over you to get to that next one. That is absolutely right. So whoever you are, wherever you are listening from, whatever level of failure or success you've achieved today, we love to hear from you. If you have any comments, anything that resonated with you for today, just drop us an email, calmcockpit@gmail.com. We'd love to hear if you have any other extra tips or thoughts about failure, how you handle it, things that we glaringly missed. Tell us how we failed in this episode so we can learn, because I'm sure this is a huge topic and I know there's a lot of collective wisdom out there. So something you share with us that we can share in a future episode might help someone out there right now who's really struggling and suffering, and it might give them a little boost. So please do drop us that email. What else do we want to tell the people?
Well, you can follow us on any of the major social media channels at Calm Cockpit, sometimes Calm Cockpit Podcast, depending on where you're looking, but I'm sure you'll find it. And if you haven't subscribed or liked the podcast on whatever platform you listen to us on, we'd love it if you did. Give us a rating if you can, but keep those downloads coming. We appreciate you listening. And as Geeta said, we want to hear from you, so please reach out if you can. And yeah, I think we'll continue this discussion with our thoughts on how this relates to performance anxiety and the yips and moving forward. So that'll be our next major stride.
We'll leave it there for now. Thank you for listening. And until next time, please fly smarter
and stress less.
Airbus Air 1 departure is Airbus 321. Traffic holding crossing runway 33 left 3 lane.